My husband punched my pregnant sister, and he was the hero. The punch was a sickening thud, a sound that seemed to suck all the air out of the room, silencing the cheerful chatter and saccharine baby shower music in an instant. My husband, Mark, a man whose gentleness was his defining feature, stood with his fist extended, his knuckles white, his face a mask of cold, hard fury I had never seen before. My sister, Sarah, 8 months pregnant and radiant in a flowing yellow maternity dress, folded in half like a piece of paper, a silent gasp escaping her lips before she crashed backward into the meticulously arranged gift table. Pink and blue wrapping paper exploded into the air, a confetti of our family's misplaced love and support. For a split second, the 50 guests stood frozen in a tableau of pure, unadulterated shock. Then, the world erupted into chaos. A collective scream tore through the room. I was the first to move, a primal, protective rage surging through me. I shoved Mark backward, my hands slamming against his chest. "What is wrong with you?" I shrieked, my voice a raw, unfamiliar sound in my own ears. He didn't even seem to feel it. His eyes, burning with a terrifying intensity, were still locked on my sister, who was now crumpled on the floor amidst the wreckage of tiny booties and stuffed animals. My mother's wail cut through the noise as she fumbled for her phone, her fingers stabbing at the screen. "I'm calling 911, she sobbed. "Assault. He's assaulted a pregnant woman." My father and my 2 older brothers, their faces a mixture of confusion and rage, descended on Mark, pinning him against the wall. I joined them, my own fists pounding against his chest, a stream of incoherent, furious words pouring from my mouth. "Psychopath. Monster. How could you?" But all I could see was my sister, my little sister, lying on the floor, her arms wrapped tightly around her belly, her face contorted in pain. "Something's wrong," she cried, her voice a thin, terrified whimper. Her boyfriend, David, a sweet, bewildered man who was utterly out of his depth, knelt beside her, his hands hovering uselessly, frantically checking for blood. Phones were out, dozens of them, the lenses of their cameras like 100 unblinking eyes, all documenting our family's spectacular implosion. My grandmother, her face ashen, clutched at her chest, the shock of it all too much for her 80-year-old heart. I dropped to my knees beside Sarah, my own medical training, years of it, kicking in. "Sarah, let me feel," I pleaded, trying to get my hands on her stomach to check for the baby's movement, for a heartbeat, for any sign of life. "Let me feel the baby kick." But she pushed my hands away with a surprising strength. "Don't touch it," she screamed. "It hurts too much." Our neighbor, a retired midwife, rushed forward to help, but Sarah curled into a tight, protective ball, her sobs turning into high-pitched, hysterical screams every time someone got close. My uncle was already on the phone with his lawyer, his voice a low, furious growl. "Attempted murder," he was saying, "of an unborn child. We're pressing charges. We're going to destroy him." In the middle of this maelstrom of panic and grief, Mark's voice, a raw, desperate roar, cut through the noise. "Look at her stomach," he yelled, still struggling against the grip of my father and brothers. "Look where I hit her." I wanted to kill him. I wanted to scratch his eyes out for his callous, cruel lack of remorse. But his words, their sheer, insane confidence, made me look. And then I saw it. In the center of Sarah's perfectly round, 8-month pregnant belly, there was a deep, unnatural dent, an indentation that wasn't popping back out. It was as if her stomach was made not of flesh and life, but of something else entirely. That's memory foam under her dress. Mark's voice was ragged, breathless, but filled with a chilling certainty. "It's not a baby, and I can prove everything. Everything she's been doing." Before anyone could process his words, I lunged forward, my fingers pressing into the dent on Sarah's belly. My hands, trained to feel for the subtle signs of life, went numb. I wasn't feeling skin and muscle. I was feeling the hard, synthetic edge of a foam prosthetic. I felt Velcro straps. I felt padding. Where my nephew, my unborn nephew, should have been, there was only a lie, a carefully constructed, horrifying illusion. "She's been buying different-sized fake bellies online for months to fake the progression," Mark continued, his words now a torrent of revelation, each one a fresh blow to our shattered reality. "She's been stealing ultrasound photos from online pregnancy forums and photoshopping her name onto them. She has scammed every single person in this room out of thousands of dollars for medical bills and prenatal care for appointments that never existed. I checked with every OB/GYN in the city. None of them have ever seen her." My mother, her face a mask of disbelief, began tearing at Sarah's dress, ripping the delicate fabric, exposing the entire, intricate contraption of foam and straps that was strapped around her waist. The room erupted in a new wave of screams, this time not of fear, but of pure, mind-bending shock. David, her boyfriend, stumbled backward, his face a canvas of horror and betrayal, as he stared at the woman he thought was carrying his child. My sister, my poor pregnant sister, was a fraud. My husband, the monster, was a hero. My mind rewound, frantically trying to piece together the last few months, to see the clues that had been hiding in plain sight. Mark and I had been married for 5 years, a comfortable, happy partnership built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. But for the past year, a subtle, almost imperceptible shadow had fallen over us, and that shadow was my sister. Sarah had always been difficult. She was the baby of the family, and she had perfected the art of weaponizing her supposed fragility to get what she wanted. She was a master manipulator, a chameleon who could shift from sweet and vulnerable to cruel and calculating in the blink of an eye. My parents, blinded by a love that was more about guilt than affection, had always enabled her, always made excuses for her, always forced me to be the bigger person, the responsible one, the one who had to swallow her own feelings to keep the peace. When Sarah had announced her pregnancy 9 months ago, the family had been overjoyed. David, her kind, stable, and utterly devoted boyfriend of 2 years, was ecstatic. He had immediately started planning, painting the nursery, assembling the crib, his happiness a bright, shining thing. I had been happy for her, too, genuinely. I had hoped that motherhood would finally be the thing that grounded her, that gave her a sense of purpose beyond her own selfish desires. But Mark, my quiet, observant husband, had been skeptical from the start. He'd seen through her performances for years, recognizing the subtle tells of her manipulation that my own family was so blind to. He started noticing the inconsistencies, the little details that didn't add up. Sarah would complain about debilitating morning sickness, but then he'd see her on a friend's Instagram story, happily downing a plate of greasy bacon. She would talk about her latest OB/GYN appointment, but when he'd casually ask for the doctor's name to send a thank you note for their excellent care, she would become vague and evasive. His suspicions grew into a quiet, secret investigation. He started by checking our credit card statements. Sarah, who had a habit of borrowing my card for online purchases, had, he discovered, been ordering a series of increasingly larger, hyperrealistic silicone pregnancy bellies from a theatrical supply website. He found the deleted search history on our shared family computer: how to fake morning sickness, realistic pregnancy symptoms by week, what to say at a baby shower to sound authentic. He then moved on to the ultrasound photos she had so proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Using a reverse image search, he found the original, unphotoshopped images on a public pregnancy forum, posted by a dozen different expectant mothers from all over the country. The final, most terrifying piece of the puzzle came from a friend of his who worked in security at the local hospital. Mark, with a growing sense of dread, had asked him to review the security footage from the maternity ward. What he found was chilling. For the past 2 months, Sarah had been a regular visitor to the hospital. She had joined the teen pregnancy support group, a young woman in her late 20s pretending to be a scared, pregnant teenager, weaving a sob story about having no family support. The footage showed her befriending one girl in particular, a shy, vulnerable-looking teenager named Becca Torres, who was always alone. Sarah had been meticulously studying her, learning her schedule, her habits, her due date. The day before the baby shower, Mark had followed Sarah. She hadn't gone to her supposed final prenatal appointment. She had gone to a costume shop downtown, where he watched her purchase a set of nurse's scrubs and a realistic-looking fake ID badge. He then saw her at a copy shop, making forgeries of birth certificates. Her plan, he realized with a dawning, sickening horror, was monstrous in its simplicity and its audacity. She was going to disappear after the baby shower, check into a motel, and wait. The next morning, she would go to the hospital, dressed as a nurse, during the morning shift change. She would walk into Becca Torres's room, take her newborn baby, and walk out. She would then reappear a day later, a proud new mother, her own miracle baby in her arms. The birthing center, she had told everyone she was delivering at, it didn't exist. She had been taking hormones to induce lactation. She had a breast pump and formula ready. She had thought of everything. As the chaos of the reveal swirled around us, Mark, still pinned against the wall, laid out the entire, horrifying timeline, his voice a raw, ragged testament to the secret he had been carrying alone for weeks. He had tried to tell me, he said, his eyes finding mine across the room. He had tried to warn me that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong, but I had dismissed his concerns, blinded by my own sisterly loyalty, by my own desperate hope that Sarah had finally changed. He had known that a simple accusation would be useless. She would deny it, twist it, paint him as a jealous, controlling husband. He had needed undeniable, irrefutable proof. The punch, he explained, his voice cracking with the weight of it, was his last, desperate resort. It was a calculated act of violence designed to do one thing: exposed the lie in the most public, most undeniable way possible, before she had a chance to enact the final, terrible stage of her plan. The room was a whirlwind of motion. My cousin was on the phone with the police, her voice a shrill, panic staccato as she tried to explain the fraud, the fake pregnancy, the planned kidnapping. My aunts, their faces a mixture of fury and shame, were huddled together, frantically calculating how much money they had collectively loaned Sarah for her non-existent medical expenses. My sister, my real, monstrous sister, finally broke free from her shocked paralysis. "You ruined everything," she snarled at Mark, her voice a low, venomous hiss. She ripped the foam prosthetic from her waist and hurled it at his feet, where it lay, a dented, pathetic symbol of her grotesque deception. "That teenager is a drug addict who doesn't deserve a baby," she screamed, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred I had never seen before. I would have given it a perfect life. A life it deserved. She made a break for the door, but my father and brothers, their own faces a grim mask of dawning horror, blocked her path, forming a human wall. She was a trapped animal now, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The mask of the sweet, fragile, misunderstood victim had finally, completely, fallen away, and what was left beneath was something cold, hard, and utterly terrifying. She broke free from my dad's grip and lunged at Mark, her nails outstretched like claws. But my brothers were ready for her this time. They tackled her, bringing her down to the living room carpet, where she thrashed and kicked, a wild, cornered creature, screaming about her perfect plan and how we had all betrayed her. The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, a fitting soundtrack to the end of her reign of terror. David, her now ex-boyfriend, stood frozen by the couch, his eyes fixed on the dented foam belly on the floor, his brain clearly unable to process the sheer, mind-bending magnitude of her betrayal. Two police officers burst through the front door, their hands on their holsters, and stopped dead, taking in the bizarre, chaotic scene. My sister, still fighting against my brother's grip, was screaming that the teenage girl didn't deserve her baby anyway. They pulled out their handcuffs as she continued to alternate between sobbing about how we had all betrayed her and threatening what she would do to us when she got out. They read her rights as they dragged her, still kicking and screaming, toward the waiting police car, the neighbors all spilling out onto their lawns to watch the spectacle. In the surreal, quiet aftermath, our house became a crime scene. A detective arrived and began taking statements. My husband gave them Becca Torres's name, and an urgent call was made to the hospital. Within the hour, Becca had been moved to a secure, undisclosed room, a guard posted outside her door. An emergency protection order was signed by a judge that same night. The detective confirmed Mark's timeline. Security footage showed Sarah had been stalking the poor, unsuspecting girl for 2 months. But in the middle of this maelstrom of legal and emotional chaos, another officer approached my husband. "Sir," he said, his voice polite but firm, "you're under arrest for assault." A fresh wave of protests erupted, but the law, it turned out, was a blunt instrument. Assault was assault, regardless of the context. I watched, my heart sinking, as they put my hero in handcuffs. He spent the night in a holding cell while I scrambled to find a lawyer and post his bail. The next morning, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, David, showed up at our door, his face a hollow mask of grief. He had spent the night packing her things and had found 3 more fake pregnancy bellies in their closet, all of different sizes, meticulously labeled, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. He showed me videos he'd found on her phone, videos of her practicing her pregnant walk in their bathroom mirror, studying her posture, her gait, perfecting her performance. The news, of course, exploded. Our family name was all over the local channels. The story of the fake pregnancy and the attempted kidnapping a juicy, sensationalist tale. My parents were hounded by reporters, their lives, their reputations, shattered by the daughter they had so blindly adored. The police search of Sarah's apartment unearthed more chilling evidence. Notebooks filled with a stalker's level of detail about Becca Torres's daily routine, and receipts for the nurse's scrubs, and a fake hospital ID badge. And then, the final, selfish betrayal. We discovered she had used my social security number and my mother's to open multiple credit cards, maxing them all out, leaving us with tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent debt. 3 days later, Becca Torres gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She was safe. Her baby was safe. And my sister was in a jail cell where she couldn't hurt anyone else. But the fight was far from over. Sarah, from her jail cell, announced her intention to go to trial. She was going to argue, with a chilling, narcissistic logic, that she was not a kidnapper, but a savior, a woman who was performing a public service by rescuing a baby from an unfit, teenage mother. The months that followed were a grueling marathon of legal battles and emotional recovery. My husband, Mark, pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor assault charge. The judge, acknowledging the extreme circumstances, sentenced him to 6 months of anger management classes and 100 hours of community service, which he began teaching at a local youth center, using his own story to teach kids about the consequences of violence, even when it's justified. My sister's trial was a circus. She represented herself, her courtroom antics a masterclass in delusion and deflection. But the evidence was overwhelming. The videos, the notebooks, the testimony of a dozen victims she had stalked and scammed. Becca, her voice trembling but strong, took the stand, her baby daughter in her arms, and told the world how my sister had hunted her. The jury took less than 3 hours to find her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 18 years in a psychiatric correctional facility. Our family began the slow, painful process of healing. My parents, consumed by a shame and guilt so profound it was almost a physical illness, started going to a support group for families affected by crime. My husband and I entered couples counseling to work through the trauma of that day, the complex mixture of gratitude and horror that still lingered between us. Becca, with the help of a dedicated social worker and her long-lost brother who had returned after seeing her story on the news, began to build a new life for herself and her daughter. She got her GED, enrolled in college, and is now studying to become a social worker herself, determined to help other young mothers navigate the system. The last time I saw my sister was at a parole hearing 10 years later. She was older, her face harder, but her eyes held the same cold, unrepentant fire. Her request was denied. A few months ago, my husband and I found out we were pregnant. It was a long, difficult journey to get here, a journey of healing and forgiveness, not of my sister, but of ourselves. When our daughter is born, we will name her Hope, because in the darkest, most unimaginable of circumstances, that is what we have learned to hold on to. The cycle of my sister's destruction is over. A new cycle, one of love, resilience, and hope, has just begun.